Welcome to the first episode of The Third Divide. My guest today is Raheem Daunoy. So why don't you take it away, Raheem? Why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, hi guys. My name is Raheem Donwa. I'm a sophomore at Howard University, a SHPEP scholar, and a ROTC MS2 cadet. And I'm on this interview with my good friend Muhammad, from back in the day. So, you know, what's up, y'all?
All right, sounds good. So Raheem, how old were you when you first moved to the UAE?
I was like 12 years old
You were
when
12
we
years
moved.
old.
Yeah, I was 12. It was back in 2014.
All right. What was your first impression when you found out that you were moving there? Because I'm pretty sure you were living in the States before then.
Yeah, so I did a whole essay about this. When I first moved there, I was really apprehensive. It's a new environment. My parents, just taking me from what I've known growing up and just bringing me to a completely different new world, different culture, different language, like I knew nothing about. So I was very nervous. I wasn't too excited about it. I didn't really like it at first, but once the years pass, like I'm really starting to appreciate that experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it was a completely different experience, right? And so, what
yeah,
was your first impression when you first got there? So you
when I
didn't like
first,
it at first, but then you grew on you.
yeah,
What was it? What was it exactly that really stood out?
I mean, when I first got there, I was really taken back by how beautiful the place was. It was a far cry from what I grew up around in America. Just seeing the skyscrapers, riding through Abu Dhabi initially. Like I was really shocked. And I mean that was my initial reaction, just like, wow, this place is actually like pretty, crazy. But I still just didn't like it
Eccentric.
because it's yeah, I just didn't like it because it wasn't home, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how my initial reaction was.
All right. So, what major changes, or what? How did you exactly adapt to your new environment?
Right. Well, at first my brother, sister, and I, we were homeschooled. So it was kind of hard to adapt because we would just be inside. We were in a hotel room initially in Abu Dhabi as well. And so we didn't have any friends yet. But once I entered school, when I went to Manor Hall, that's where I graduated from. That's where you and I met.
Yeah.
That's how I was able to adapt. Seeing people who were like me, people who are also from America who had the same interests as me, playing basketball, just making friends. That's really how I adapt to the environment and just starting to integrate and learn about the culture, you know?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, when you move somewhere else, I think the most effective way to get to know everybody and just to acclimate to an environment, just to play
Yeah,
sports. That's honestly what I did. Like I lived in 7 countries throughout my, sorry, 3 countries throughout my life. Went to
three
seven
countries.
schools. Sports is really what got me through it.
Yeah. It's something that brings people together,
Always.
even if it's just watching, it
Mhm.
brings people together. So yeah.
Totally, totally. So looking back at it now, like all your experiences, everything you went through. So how did your worldview change?
How did my worldview change?
Did you look at some things a little differently, maybe?
What I looked at differently was that the world didn't revolve around the United States, you know,
Mhm.
because how American media would like to portray things is that they do a lot of bashing of different cultures, or, you don't need to go anywhere. You have all 50 states, and that's really what people, filter themselves around. But me being taken out of that environment and put into a whole different country was a culture shock. And it made me realize, and I got to see a lot of the problems that my own country had from the outside. You know what I mean? And so I had a realization of, like I said, America isn't the world and it's not my only option, you know?
So in a way, you kind of realized that you were locked in.
I was, yeah. So like, just with the culture around America, like it's vastly different to different places. It's a very constant pace, fast paced lifestyle. There's no breaks. But like being in the UAE during Ramadan, like everything shuts down at like 4 o'clock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it'll open up after iftar. So that's something I've never experienced. The amount of breaks that I've gotten throughout the school years. And just how like calm everyone was
Hmm.
in the UAE, how safe it was in UAE. It wasn't. It's really not like that back home.
Okay.
So that's something I got to realize as well. Like a lot of things I'm also told about places isn't what it really seemed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Totally. So like, what was the biggest benefit that you've gained from studying and living abroad and just interacting with all these different cultures and and what kind of challenges did you face as well? Like I'm pretty sure because you said it was pretty hard to adapt at first.
Well, benefits I receive is diversity within my adolescence.
Hmm.
I've grown up around a multitude of different races, and that's integrated within me now. And just as, like I said, experience, being outside of your comfort zone and being outside of your cold place that you were born, home, you know, and experiencing travel. Like I got to see the world at a young age, you know. And so those are things I've got that benefit me, and it also looks good on the application. So um, but the challenges, I mean, just being away from family, really,
Yeah.
being out there, it does get like, you know, lonely sometimes. Like my people aren't with me, you
Yeah.
know? And so that was a real big challenge that I had, as well as changing curriculum. Like I went to the British curriculum for a little bit. And so like that kind of gave me a academic challenge,
Hmm.
that I had to overcome. But yeah, that's really the gist of it.
Yeah. And like so you go to Howard University now. You can see the
Yeah.
poster behind you. Right.
Poster,
Right. Did you feel like
hoodie.
awesome, bro? Awesome. So did you feel like a bit of a sense of relief when you went to university, when you started university? Because that like now you're back in the States, you're you're closer to your family. Did you feel a bit of a sense of relief from that point of view?
Um, well, from the point of view that you just described, not necessarily.
Hmm.
I mean, a sense of relief about being around family, yeah, but
Yeah.
being back home, not necessarily, because we're in America, we're in the middle of a what's it called? Civil rights movement.
Exactly.
And so being in that environment, how hostile it could be, like how America is. I didn't really want to go back to that. I want to stay in the comfort of like being with my parents in the UAE and how safe it was, you know?
Yeah.
Um, what else? What else did you ask?
It's like, was it easier? Like it was harder for you from that perspective, but was it easier at all from any other?
Oh yeah, it was easier. It was easier because I got to go to my dream school. Well, I am attending my dream school, and I also got to experience life on my own. I moved to Washington, D.C. in my second semester of school. So from January to April
Hmm.
of this year.
Yeah.
And it's an HBCU. HBCU is a historically Black college university. And so I got to see a lot of, other Black kids, which I didn't really get growing up in school. And so being around that, it was a sense of comfort,
Hmm.
and it was an experience that I feel like I'll cherish, you know, being at it's Howard is called the Mecca, you know, in comparison to the city in Saudi Arabia. So being at the Mecca of the HBCUs, I don't know. It just feels good. And so that's something that I enjoy about coming back. And so, you got a parallel of two sides for me coming here.
Mhm.
But yeah.
I mean, and Black culture is something that's really important to you.
Hmm.
So that's something that you felt like you had to preserve, and like you worked to preserve it when you were living in the UAE, in the UAE?
You said I wasn't preserving in
No,
UAE?
no, no. Like what? Like in a sense, did you feel like it was your duty to preserve it, or like it was your job to
I
do that?
mean,
Did you
I
work
didn't
hard at it?
actively I didn't actively think like that. It was just more of how my family is and how
Mhm.
the people we surrounded ourselves with out there, like it just naturally was preserved
Yeah,
while
because
we were in UAE.
yeah, I mean, it's just because it can be hard when you're living in a completely different
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why you just have to surround yourself with, you know, people like yourself. Like you're Egyptian, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so in the UAE, I'm sure like your main circle of people that your family friends with, were they Egyptian?
Yeah, a lot of them were.
Yeah. And so it's the same for us, you
Mhm,
know? And so that's how we preserve that. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And like, so like, did you ever feel confused about where your home really was, or like, what was it? What was home to you, like throughout your childhood?
Wow. I mean, home is New Orleans, Louisiana. That's where I was born.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't grow up there completely, of course,
Okay.
but I mean, my ties there run deep. I visit there as often as anyone would, their own city, uh, as well as Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I grew up for the beginning of my childhood, and as well as UE. So, like, what I considered home is just like whenever I'm in any of those places, I feel like I'm at home, you know? So, whenever I go down to New Orleans, I feel like I'm at home, you know?
Yeah.
I'm staying in Georgia right now and I feel like I'm at home, and I'm sure when I go to the UAE in December, I'm gonna feel like I'm at home,
Hmm.
you know.
Right. And like all this bouncing around between place to place to place, do you think like think it's hard? Do you think it would have been easier if you grew up in one place at one time?
Um, Not necessarily,
Not necessarily.
because I mean my life was relatively a lot easier than a lot of people who live in one place. I have family members who's never seen outside of New Orleans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And their situation isn't better than mine, you know?
Hmm.
And so it's not difficult living in multiple places. Like I said, I've received the experience, and this was a gift, that a lot of people that where I'm from doesn't really receive, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So like what you're saying. Look, the reason I asked that question was because for me, so like I was born in Egypt, and I lived there for the first like 6 years of my life. Then I moved to the UAE. But
Hmm.
obviously we kept going back and forth. We kept visiting in the summer. And so then we moved to Canada when I was going into grade 9. So I moved to Surrey, and then like in the second semester of grade 9, I moved to Prince George, where I'm living now. Then we moved to Victoria. Then we moved back to Prince George by the time I was in grade 12. And for like that, all like having all these connections everywhere, that made me personally feel confused, right?
Hmm.
And after my grade 12 year, I actually went back to visit Egypt. That would have been my first time in 4 years. And like honestly, I feel like I felt like I would have been a lot less confused once I got there, but the opposite is what happened. Because I was really excited to go there, and I went outside every day, but then I ended up leaving more confused than anything else. I didn't necessarily have a bad time. I had a great time. I enjoyed seeing all my family again, but it made me feel a lot more confused.
Maybe
And
you
sorry.
what are you saying? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that made me think about where my home is. I mean, is it here? Is it in Egypt? Is it in the UAE? And then I thought, okay, let's just say, what if I moved back to the UAE for a couple of months? Would it be the same? Then I just realized that a lot of the people that I know who used to live there, just they don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't really know anyone who still lives there. So it wouldn't have been the same at all. Made me kind of think, is home more of a people or a place? And I kind of came to the conclusion that
Oh wow.
it's it has to be a combination of the two of them.
Yeah, I can actually see that, you know, because when I did move back to Georgia after the UAE, the people that I knew were still here, like that I grew up with, but the disconnect of being away from each other for like 5+ years, you know, we're all completely different people now. And so it kind of was like no one I really knew was here, you
Yeah,
know? And so it kind of does feel a little different than how I did when I was growing up here. But at the same time, I don't know, it's just this was like my hometown, like that that raised me. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so like I still have that, like it still feels like home regardless, you know. I feel like I'll forever have a connection like here.
Yeah, I think it's the same with me. I think I'll always have a connection to Alexandria, which is like the city where my family's from in Egypt.
Mm,
But yeah, a lot of the people that I knew back there too, we've just grown apart. And yeah, like you said, we're not really the same people we used to know.
yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
my
So
final question for you today is so there's this quote that I really like, and it's basic. I don't remember who exactly came up with it, but it goes something like this. It says home is the place where you finally stop running, right? So for you right now, where is home?
place where I finally stopped running. Well, my my life isn't concluded. Not want to say concluded, but um I'm not established yet. I haven't stopped running because I'm gonna be in DC literally next month,
Hmm.
you know, going back to school. So I'm gonna be there for 4 years, and then with my ROTC obligations, I could be stationed somewhere else. So through the military. So I really don't know where I'll be when it is all said and done. And right now, like I said, there's a combination of multiple homes.
Yeah.
Washington, DC is also a home to me,
Hmm.
because that's where my university is. That's where I spent the past 3 months on my own for the first time in my
Yeah.
life, you know?
Yeah. I got that.
So I have multiple homes as of right now.
All right. Raheem, this was like a really great conversation to have. It was good to see you again. Thank you so
Yes,
much
sir.
for coming on here.